Hello and a very warm welcome, viewers. You're watching the brand new edition of To The Point with your host, Kriti Mishra. And on today's show, joining us is the newly elected president of Confederation of Indian Industry, Mr. TV Narendran, who's also global CEO and managing director of Tata Steel. Sir, welcome to Sansad TV and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kriti. Good to be here.
First of all, thank you so much, sir. First of all, congratulations for your new innings. And of course, talking about the first press conference that you did, you said that as the economy reopens post the second wave, a dual-pronged government strategy is required to boost consumption and support industry till demand is well entrenched. What should be the roadmap ahead, sir?
So I think what we're saying is the recovery before COVID-2 was better than most people thought. If you look at the GST collections, they were more than 1 lakh crore for 6 months in a row. In fact, it went up to 1.4 lakh crores in April, dropped down to 1 lakh crore in May. So I think the recovery was on track till COVID-2 hit us, right? Globally also, the macroeconomic conditions are good. Most countries are trying to spend their way out of trouble. That makes it positive for India as well, because we can piggyback onto the opportunities that there are. But having said that, I think we need to work on two areas. One is we need to work on sectors of the industry who are still struggling. There are sectors of the industry who are recovered quite well, who don't need the support from the government, but there are sectors who need support from the government, particularly the high contact sectors, travel and tourism related, the restaurants, the hospitality sector, aviation sector. You know, these are all areas which have really struggled and will need support. Secondly, we've said that most households have spent more on medical expenses than they had planned to over the last 12 months, right? So we need to make sure, and at the same time, there are many cases where jobs are in threat, salary hikes are not there, or salary cuts have been taken, etc. So we need to see how is it that we can help people who are struggling from a consumption point of view. I mean, how do they spend on the expenses, on daily expenses? And that's where our suggestion on the consumption side is to see, can we cut the GST rate, let's say, for regular consumer goods by 2 to 3% for 6 months? We are not saying cut it permanently just to help people during this phase. Secondly, we're saying, can we increase the allocation for schemes like Manrega so that there is activity in rural communities as well? Assets are created and money flows to the rural communities, because that can also help consumption. I think most important is to get the growth back, because that will address the issue of the fiscal deficit. Even as we do the projections, we believe fiscal deficit will be at about 6.8%. And if you allow for this 2,70,000 crores or 3 lakh crore fiscal stimulus that we're talking about, the fiscal deficit will go to 8%, which we believe is still okay if India gets back onto growth. But I think the most important thing before all this is vaccination. If we don't get the vaccination numbers up quickly and have more people vaccinated in the next few months, we will have a challenging COVID-3. So I think vaccination followed by growth is what we want to happen. And for that, the government support on both on the specific sectors as well as to help consumption.
All right, you made several important points. I'll just try to get clarification on all of that. But you also mentioned that some sectors have been hit hard, particularly by the pandemic, including tourism, hospitality, and aviation. What kind of interventions are you looking at, sir?
So in terms of aviation, one of the suggestions we had is, can we put the ATF, which is a big part of the cost for the aviation sector, in GST, because then they can get input credit for that, right? Because 60% of the cost for aviation for the airline companies are fuel, and fuel costs are also going up. So if you put ATF and GST, then they get some input credit. If you look at travel and tourism and hospitality, of course, it'll be some time before we can get international tourists. But we are saying, can we incentivize local travel for people who've been vaccinated and are safe? You know, in terms of some stops on the LTCs for government employees or for public sector employees, and encourage private sector also to support, so that we get people to travel around locally as long as they are safe and they're vaccinated without adding to the risk of spreading COVID. So these are some things that we can do, and different governments have done it differently. If you look at the UK, when they opened up last year, they gave incentives to people to go out and eat in restaurants, So I think there are different ways in which we can structure incentives for people to go and spend money in outlets which have struggled during the last 12 to 14 months. So these are some of the suggestions that we had.
All right, talking about the fiscal stimulus part of it, as you said that 3 lakh crore would be required. You also said that there is room for administering additional fiscal stimulus. Many would disagree with the fiscal headroom that you're assessing.
Yeah, I mean, disagree in terms of whether we will end up at 6.8 or disagree that 8% is manageable.
Both probably?
Yeah, so I think, obviously, if you look at the 8% number in normal times, you would have said that's very high. But even if you look at last year's budget, I think where the finance minister said that we will live with a slightly bigger fiscal deficit for some time, because I think if you get growth back, a lot of these issues get sorted out automatically. And I think that's obviously a judgment call that you take to say, if you don't have growth anyway, you will have a problem. So I think what we need is to get the growth back. And we believe that if you get the growth back, as was reflected in the robust GST numbers over the last few months, you will have better tax rates, better tax collections. Private sector investment is already starting to come back in some sectors. If you look at the steel industry, I think between all the major steel companies, they've already announced 50-60,000 crores worth of investments. So I think it's a cycle which we need to make sure that we get back on track, because we don't have an option if we don't grow anyways, in terms of solving some of the problems that we have. So it's important to take some chances in that sense of the term to get the growth back. So that's the way we look at it. And as CII, we feel that that's the right thing to do.
All right, as you said, that government has also taken several steps, unveiled several schemes, appropriate policy measures like the PLI scheme. They would also go a long way in improving the supply side constraints. But these may turn out to be less than adequate if the demand side continues to remain sluggish, sir. What is the way ahead then?
So again, the demand side, India has traditionally been a consumption-led economy, right? It's been consumption-led growth over the years. For a developing country, I think it's important to also get investment-led growth. And I think the government's focus on infrastructure over the last few years, specifically in the last budget, where there's been significant outlay for infrastructure, both health infrastructure and other infrastructure, is extremely important, because investment in infrastructure works in multiple ways. Firstly, it triggers construction activity across the country and far away from the urban centers as well, because sometimes a lot of jobs are generated in urban centers and not enough closer to where people live. Secondly, if you spend on infrastructure, you benefit a large number of construction companies, MSMEs, of course, metals, cement, multiple sectors are benefited from investment in construction and infrastructure. Thirdly, by doing that, you are also helping the competitiveness of industry, because a lot of competitiveness that is created inside the factory gate is negated outside the factory gate because of the infrastructure deficits, right? And this, in some sense, triggers demand, right? And once you have triggered demand, and if you have a situation where demand growth is there, capacity utilization gets better, and profitability improves, then private sector investment will automatically come. Because private sector investments will not come if demand growth is not there and profitability is not there, because it is private sector, right? Somebody has to fund the growth, and that's why it's important to get that back. And like I said, we are seeing it in some sectors already. If you look at the auto industry, they have actually struggled for the last 3-4 years, even before the pandemic. So even if they have a good growth this year, they will only go back to where they were 4 years back. So for them to start expanding capacity, they need to utilize capacities that have been in place for 4 years, right? So I think this cycle will come back. It should and has started with the government spending money. Of course, I am conscious of the fact that the government is impatient for private sector to also invest, but I think that will follow. It is starting to happen in some sectors, and I'm confident that if we get the growth back to the 9% that we're talking about, not just for this year, but for subsequent years, you will see private sector investment coming back. We should also recognize that a lot of private sector investment over the last 10 years happened in steel and power, and these were the most impacted from an NPA point of view. These were the most impacted, or most of the cases which went to IBC. So even the banks were losing confidence in some of these sectors to lend, right? So all that is starting to change. And I think the correction that has happened in the balance sheet of the country, in some sense, or balance sheet of the banks, is now going to hopefully trigger more investments in the years ahead.
But Mr. Narendran, the concern of the government is also not unwarranted, because private investment has remained muted for a very long time now.
I agree with that. But If you look at the economic situation in India, like I said, the utilization of capacities, the profitability of companies, the leverage in the balance sheets, all were not good, right? I mean, so I think there was very little appetite for private sector investment in that sense of the term over the last few years, which is changing now. But if you see now, there's private sector investment happening. Apart from what I talked about, steel announcing private sector, expansion projects, you see a lot of private sector investment in supply chains and warehousing because to support the growth in e-commerce in the company. You see FDI coming in electronics manufacturing, right? So there are areas where we are seeing investments come in. And I think if not for COVID, we would have had a very good year last year, because auto was coming back to stream and private sector investment was starting to happen.
All right, let's assume that domestic demand may take some time to recover. Do you think exports will provide the growth trigger for the Indian economy moving ahead?
It can and it should, because some of the, if you see the export numbers, they're growing, right? Because the opportunity is there. But obviously, we need to export more because the trade balance is shifting because the imports are going up as the economy picks up and also because oil prices are going up. So, we need to find ways to export more. Exporters, of course, seek for more support from the government in terms of RoDTEP and various other incentives that there are. But I think globally, there is an opportunity to export more for 2-3 reasons. One is developed countries are having a robust recovery. And 2 is many of them are looking to de-risk their supply chains by looking beyond China. For most of them, beyond China, the most favorite destination is Vietnam. But beyond Vietnam, I think India is positioned quite well. India is fairly unique because India not only offers an opportunity to invest for exports, but also offers an investment opportunity to invest for the domestic market. So we need to leverage that. And obviously, we need to work harder to get more investments in and more exports out.
All right, more investment and more exports. But shifting the focus, as you were talking about fiscal deficit, the latest figures that we had, they came at marginally better position. But the government has set the target of 1.75 lakh crore disinvestment. It has also clarified that COVID-19 is not going to impact the target. Do you agree? What is your assessment?
I think obviously the government has made a lot of moves in this, but I can also appreciate that the government wants to time it well because the last thing you want to do is to divest when the markets are not ready for it or not in the right space for it, in terms of the sentiment, right? So I think, let's say if you look at aviation, etc., when the aviation sector is down in the dumps, would you divest or would you wait for a slightly better time? I think these must be the issues in the government, or can they be a way in which you divest where you can ride the upside also, So I think these are some things which I'm sure the government is thinking about. So if they say that they are going to hit those targets, then I'm sure they have plans over the next 12 months to take a lot of action. But I think fundamentally, if you can get these assets more productively utilized, I think that's good for the country and good overall for the industry.
All right, you also said that the recovery also depends on the speed of our vaccination. CII has also called upon the government to hire a vaccine czar like the UK to streamline the vaccination exercise. What would it mean? What are your suggestions to the government?
So I think what we're saying is this is so important that it is worth thinking about something like this, because there are multiple complexities to deal with. You have to deal with the center, you have to deal with the states, you have to deal with the private sector, you have to deal with, the government hospitals, because rolling out vaccination, taking it up from the 3 million vaccinations a day to 7 million vaccinations a day on an average for the next few months is not going to be easy, right? And there will be many, many challenges to deal with. And so we should try to simplify it or try to make sure that we don't add another layer of complexity by having multiple people in the government to deal with as you go about rolling this out. So that's why we say that it may be useful, given the criticality of this journey for the recovery of growth and for the safety of our citizens, to have one senior person in charge of this whole thing who will cut across the multiple parts of the government at the center and state to make it happen. And we have a history, even in India, when you were doing Aadhaar, you had a person who was in charge of that, right? So I think if you want to roll out something complex, which deals with multiple parts of government, public sector and private sector, government, and the overall ecosystem, it may be helpful to think about somebody who can be given this, maybe for a year or whatever. But till you have, it's like when you roll out the elections, you have an election commissioner, and you have a election commission who coordinates and implements and makes it happen. And this is far more complex than an election in some sense, because you need to do it year in and year out. It's not going to end as a one-time event. You need to create that capabilities and set it up, because we need to keep vaccinating for a long time to come, and how do we ensure that that is in place? So we just need to think through a bit, both to deal with the short-term challenges as well as create the capabilities over the long term.
All right, that was a very nice analogy, as you said, election commission and vaccines are. But besides COVID and vaccine-related concerns, what are the key challenges for the Indian markets and the economy, sir?
Well, I think, COVID itself has been a challenge, but otherwise, I thought there were multiple things which are happening, which in the long run was good. One is formalization of the economy, a focus on driving investments towards manufacturing in India, because I feel, or rather we feel that, if we have to transition from an economy where 60-65% of the workforce depends on agriculture or land to, an economy where more and more people are not dependent on agriculture or land, then you need to have a strong manufacturing sector in addition to a strong services sector, which is already there. You need to have a strong and active construction industry. You need to create all the infrastructure. So I think some of these challenges are being addressed by the government. COVID has probably set us back by a couple of years, yes. But at a very fundamental level, I think India is well positioned to capture opportunities that there are available, because also the world is looking to de-risk supply chains, looking for more options than one. And I think this is a good position for India to be in and capitalize on the opportunities. And I think India is also well positioned as, the world moves to a more digital future. We've all been accelerated into the future. We have a good tech industry, and we need to see how to leverage that, not only to drive transformation in India, but also in the rest of the world.
Absolutely, sir. And of course, our focus has been on converting the challenges into opportunities. But one of the biggest worries that emerged during the second wave is a rise in urban unemployment. How do we make a perfect case for sustaining lives and livelihoods?
So, I wouldn't look at it purely as an urban problem. Most of the urban unemployment is also people who migrated to urban India looking for jobs, yes. Right? So I think we should also debate how can we create more jobs closer to where people are from, and how can we create investment opportunities and job opportunities from the states from where you have a lot of migrants, so that you don't have the situation of people having to stay away from families and move far away from homes just to earn a livelihood, right? So I would look at it more holistically, and to really work on specific states which have struggled to attract investments, though they have the opportunities to do that, right? So I think that's we should look at it from that point of view. We should also look at more holistically to see which state should try to attract what kind of investments, rather than every state trying to chase every investment, because some states who are geologically rich are better suited for certain types of industries. Some states who are very fertile are suited for certain other types of industry. Some states which have the ecosystem for high tech or automobile are better suited for automobile industry or high tech industry, rather than everyone chasing the same kind of industries. And I think that kind of a holistic approach, creating clusters, also creating, addressing factor costs and addressing, having land banks, industrial parks, so that people can come plug and play rather than spend a lot of time acquiring land. So I think multiple things need to be done, and we need to create jobs closer to where people are from. And
all right, before we sign off, yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Urban kind of, and then deal with urban joblessness issues, but I think look at it more holistically. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. And before we sign off, as you assume office, priorities ahead, vision ahead.
Well, we've basically said our theme is competitiveness, growth, sustainability, and technology, CGST, an easy acronym to remember. Competitiveness and growth are hygiene issues. It reflects in the theme. Whoever is a president over the last 30 years, I think 25 times we've had competitiveness and growth, because it continues to be very important. The definition of what is competitiveness and what is growth keeps changing, but it is very important. So those are the urgent stuff, here and now stuff that we need to do. Sustainability and technology are two things which are going to dominate conversation in the years ahead. Climate change is a big issue. The world is looking at India to make a net zero commitment. Most other large countries in the world have made net zero commitments, including China. So there is pressure on India to make a commitment. Once we make the commitment, we should develop a policy roadmap. We should develop a transition plan for industry. So CII as a premier industry body needs to work with the government, with our members to do that. Technology is going to be the biggest differentiator going forward. Geopolitical issues are less dependent on trade and more on technology, as we are all seeing. And India needs to, as we grow, create capabilities in areas where we would be vulnerable if you don't have that capability. And classic example is semiconductor, right? Pretty much anything you use will have a semiconductor. And if you don't have the ability to manufacture semiconductors in India, you're always vulnerable to different challenges, different geopolitical issues. So I think there is a need, while we address the problems of the next 6 months and 1 year, to also think about the problems which are going to come over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years and work towards it as an industry body and work with the government on that.
All right, Mr. Narendran, on that note, thank you so much for talking to us and all the best for your endeavors, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.